Welcome, everybody, to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez. It is Thursday, the 14th of April, and that means we're going to be here for 2 hours today. Now, usually the second hour that we do on Thursday, we record it and we play it back the following Monday. But since tomorrow is Good Friday, we're going to air that episode tomorrow and we'll be live on Monday. So joining me today, this hour, Pastor Brian Brodersen from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. And on the Bobby Cam, we've got Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube, and himself a pastor from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. What's going on, gentlemen?
Good to be with you guys.
Yes, it is. It's good to be together. What's going
Look at that
on?
buzz cut.
What's that? Oh, you noticed? Yes, I got a little
good.
trim. It's getting a bit shaggy. I got to travel, so I didn't want to come home looking like a hippie or something. So, yeah, wow, we have got a ton of stuff going on right here at the campus because we are getting set up for the big weekend that starts tomorrow at noon with the Good Friday service. And so, yeah, it's really good. Just a lot of life and excitement about what's coming up.
Bobby?
Well, I'm just studying the book of Revelation and prep for the message series. That's kind of what's been going on my end, and looking forward to digging into it.
All right.
Yep.
So there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pretty boring guy, bro.
Okay, Bobby, today
my wife
is...
will say...
Your wife will say what? Oh, your wife says you're boring?
Okay, well, yeah, she does. She says, you don't let the outside fool people, man. You might look like you're fun, but you are boring with the things I like to do. And
okay, well, here is the conclusion from our hanging out with you guys last week or whenever it was, and then you guys hanging out with Cheryl apart from me on Sunday. The conclusion is Heather and I are the extroverts, and you and Cheryl are the introverts, and you would just rather avoid the crowd, go off and read a book somewhere, and not have to actually talk to anybody. And Heather and I are out there, and we're just looking to meet everyone we can. And Cheryl said, "Now Brian is deceptive because he doesn't appear he doesn't appear to be that way on the surface." But she says, "Believe you me, he is like that."
I thought you had mixed up the words or something, because I can't picture you. I think the harder part is picturing her as an introvert, because she's so outgoing.
But there is a lot of truth to it. I mean, she... when she is in the public eye, of course, she has to be that person, but she's very shy. I mean, she would rather stay out of the public eye. Some people want to get in front of the camera. Some people want to do that. Cheryl is the exact opposite. I have to drag her into almost everything. It's like, come on, just do this, and I don't want to do it, So
fun stuff.
Yeah, I can relate to that myself. I love people, and I need to be around people and want to be around people, but I absolutely can get drained. So Sunday's a very tiring day because I'm in these environments where it's really challenging to the ADD, because you're trying to touch a bunch of people and say hello to a bunch of people, and you just go home and you need to kind of do some studying. You need to get out Plato and do some reflection.
Plato, Plato the philosopher. I thought you meant the clay stuff that you build things with.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so today is what is called Maundy Thursday. Do you know what that is, Bobby? Maundy Thursday?
I do. Yeah. Yeah, it's a celebration of of what took place in the upper room as he gears up for Good Friday.
Yeah. But you know specifically what the word Maundy is referring to?
What's that?
It comes from the Latin mandate. And it's because it was there when Jesus instituted the at the Last Supper, that he gave the mandate to love one another as I have loved you.
Mm.
And so the word mandi comes from the word mandate. And
That's really good.
yeah, John Dixon taught me that today on Twitter. And I was happy for that because I used to know that. And then I was like, okay, wait, I forget. Because people ask me, what is Maundy Thursday? What does Maundy Thursday mean? Oh, right. Yes, this is it. Mandate. So thank you, John Dixon, for that little tweet that clarified that.
Now, would his...
Yeah, that's really good. And Good Friday is also, because we think about, hey, Good Friday, what's this? And so it's also been referred to as Sorrowful Friday. Russians refer to it as Passion Friday. In Germany, it's called Karfreitag, which again would be Sorrowful Friday. It's been called Sacred Friday. The Greek church refers to it as Holy and Great Friday.
Wow.
So different terms even for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So would the mandate include when Jesus said to do this in remembrance of me in reference to communion?
No, it's actually specifically, it was in the context of Jesus washing the disciples' feet.
Okay.
So he said, I, your Lord and Master, have done this for you. You are to do this for one another. So the mandate wasn't to wash one another's feet, but as he goes on and he says, I give you a new commandment, and that new commandment is that you love one another as I have loved you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
that's good.
So
right.
Yeah, it was good. So Bobby, have you listened to Unbelievable lately? Any of the recent Justin Briley interviews?
I was listening to a little bit of one today that was a classic replay with James Orr and an atheist gentleman.
Okay. You should listen to Glenn Scrivener and Bart Ehrman. It's It's a good one. And Glenn's written a book called The Air We Breathe, which Glenn promotes that as Dominion for Dummies. And so he's taken the Tom Holland tome called Dominion, in which Tom, the British historian, pretty much says that the Western world is the way that it is because of Christianity and the influence of Christianity on it. So Glenn has taken that and he's kind of just put it more in language that's a little more digestible and not as many pages and all of that sort of thing. So him and Bart Ehrman were talking about that and kind of debate. And I've listened to a few debates with Bart Ehrman, and I have to say that for a guy who is obviously intelligent, some of his arguments are just downright stupid. And I just think, how could this guy have such a strong atheistic voice, but yet have such lame and weak arguments for things? It's kind of puzzling to me, really, what the attraction is, other than just here's a guy who's a New Testament scholar who denies that the Bible is true and is an atheist. So
I think one of the things that happens is when you get people like Ehrman or like a Sam Harris, people who use a lot of rhetoric, they end up in like Alice or Lawrence Krauss is somebody else. And there's an arrogance sometimes to these people. And when you come off just ultra confident in a crowd of people that really aren't so confident, they have influence, unfortunately. And I think that's what we can see taking place for sure with an Ehrman. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, I can't wait to read Glenn's book, The Air We Breathe. But
that sounds great.
Yeah, I think it's published through Goodreads, I think, in the UK. So probably going to have to order it on Amazon. But Glenn did a great job. He really did a really good job. He kept his cool. And Bart was very dogmatic, very insistent, very arrogant at certain points. And I thought Glenn just did a really, really great job of, humbly just pressing in on the points and just saying, no, that's really not the way it is. So,
Yeah, it's good. I look forward to listening to it.
So is this the interview here? Did I find the right one?
yeah, that's it.
All right. So if you go to YouTube, the Unbelievable channel, you can find this interview from a couple of weeks ago with Bart Ehrman and Glenn Scrivener. And then the book that Scrivener has written that's coming out soon is called The Air We Breathe, How We All Came to Believe in Freedom, Kindness, Progress, and Equality. Discover the Christian roots of the values we prize in Western society.
Okay, so and
Sounds
the book
interesting.
is out. It's out May 1st. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was already out, but
Guess not. You can pre-order it now, and it'll be on your doorstep on May 1st or May 2nd at the latest. All right, 888-564-6173 is our number. We'll start with at least one question from facebook.com/pastorsperspective. Tammy from Texas says, hello from Texas. I listen to your show every time it's on, and I always learn something new. My question deals with physical healing. How do you build your faith to believe God can heal you? I find that I can believe that others can receive healing, but not believe it for myself. I always tend to think I just have to suffer through because God is going to use it to work something out in me. Right now, I have several big health issues going on, and I would like to believe in God healing them. Thank you, and God bless each of you. Brian, what would you say about that?
well, first of all, I don't think it's really a matter of believing God can heal you, because I would assume you do believe that God can do anything. The question is really more, will God heal you? Is that his will for your healing? And that's one that's difficult to know. And I think that the best way to approach that is just to just say, Lord, I would love you to heal me, and I'm asking you to heal me. At the end, though, your will be done. And so we're recognizing or acknowledging that we don't know exactly what's best. We think we know what's best, and from the standpoint of illness or anything like that, of course, we never think that is a good thing, especially when we're in the midst of it. But sometimes we realize after we suffered that we look back and think, wow, that really was necessary. It was a good thing in my life, even though it didn't seem like a good thing at the moment. So that's where I think we're quick to go toward, I want to be healed, I want to be healed, I want to be healed. I get it. That's how I feel too when I'm afflicted. But I think we do have to recognize that God has a bigger plan that he's working out, and of course he knows better. And so if he knows that this affliction is something that is going to do in us things that need to be done and result in our growth and his glory, then he's going to sometimes let things go on in our lives. But it never hurts to ask. And I don't think it's a matter of, well, the problem is I just haven't believed enough. I don't think that's really it. I mean, it could be. It's possible that a person just really doesn't believe God could do it. But if that's the case, then just take a step back and think about who God is, think about all the things that he's done, and then put that in perspective with your situation. And I think you'll conclude that, okay, God could do this. Will God do this for me? I don't know, but he might. So I'm going to ask him to do it.
Bobby, would you add anything to that?
I would say that, the Bible does say that faith comes by hearing the word. So, getting in the word, seeing some of the miracles that happen there. But we don't want to try to muster up some kind of a healing that God's not ready to perform. And that's where it gets challenging. There are some people that are so insistent that God's going to heal every single ailment. And as I've said before, if that was the case, to the person, here's an apologetic to the person who might look down on people for not believing. Number one, that person has not experienced healings every time he or she's prayed. Otherwise, we would be recruiting that person all over the place. Number two, if every single prayer was answered for healing, we'd never get to heaven. Our ultimate healing is going to be when we're glorified. So we need to think about what that implies. So a lot of times we're just sitting around, we're praying, hey, heal this person, heal this person. Well, if God always answered those prayers, well, then we would never die of sickness. So we do die of sickness. And so God doesn't always answer those prayers. So I think Paul the apostle, he prayed for the thorn in his flesh to be removed on 3 occasions. He prayed fervently. And I think, wow, isn't that amazing? Like how many people will just pray for years and years and years and years. Paul prays 3 times. God speaks and says, my grace is sufficient for you. That doesn't mean that nobody should pray after 3 times. I mean, he had a specific word. But I feel torn when it comes to praying for people's healings, because at the end of the day, if I'm just being honest, I don't know exactly what God wills to do. And so I find myself praying, Lord, please heal this person. And then I always feel like the cop-out, but let your will be done. And then, of course, his will is going to be done. So then, praying for his will to be done, I mean, his will be done. And then you can find yourself in some circular kind of reason. Well, why am I even praying about this? And then you feel frustrated. And so I think it can create tensions in our prayer life with God. When it comes to the acts acrostic of prayer, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. Adoration, that's an easy part. God's easy to adore. Thanksgiving, it's easy to give thanks. Confession, it's easy to recognize our sin. It's that supplication piece that gets really hard to know what God's up to know what he's doing. But I will say, I think sometimes in churches, we need to believe God for more. We need to have that kind of faith. We need to have a readiness. I also will say, I have witnessed people praying. I remember going to an event, and this was a group of people that were college kids. It was kind of a college, you do 1 year with this group. And we were at this event, and we are watching these kids pray over this guy who was struggling with some ear pain, if I remember correctly. And they kept praying over him. Well, we're standing outside in the freezing cold, and they're like, can you hear okay? Is it fixed? No. They did it again, and they did it again. Well, we're all shivering, freezing cold. This poor guy's before 30 people who are pouring out their hearts to God. He's probably feeling pressure. I mean, at this point, I probably would have said, yes, I'm healed because I need to get in my heated vehicle. But this guy, he's just sitting there, and they didn't let him go. And I'm like, it was as if on one side, you got to commend these kids' faith. On the other side, you're pressuring this guy into a situation that maybe there's another way to approach prayer. So I don't know how much we can really help on this, just to say God can heal, do pray, but trust him with the results.
Tammy, thanks for sending in your question from Texas on Facebook.com/pastorsperspective using the messenger feature. And here's one sent in by McKay in Florida. A lot of home church groups use Pastor Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Church as a study guide rather than studying the Bible. Is this a good thing? Bobby, what would you say?
I think it just depends on the group and what their needs are. And I think what Rick Warren would say it is very similar. Like if you're leading a group of people and they don't really know what their purpose in life is, then here's a tool that's been created by Rick to help people to figure out what their purpose in life is. And so if you've got a bunch of Christians who are already exercising their purpose and they're going through that, then it might not be the best tool. But I would say, let's not pick on Rick Warren in Purpose-Driven Life. Then don't use any other books, right? Then just use the Bible. So I think that Rick has one tool, and it's going to be for those that are, probably newer to the faith, or they've been around the faith for a while. They've never discovered what their purpose is. It's going to be a light read, but it can create good conversation as well. And so it is one of many great tools that are out there that people can utilize. Now, here's this for me to offer. Some groups need to be careful walking through a book of the Bible. And now some might be shocked at me hearing that, because if people haven't learned any Bible study methods, they might get together and be like, well, what do you think it's saying? And what do you think it's saying? And they could butcher walking through a book of the Bible. So having tools can be a really good thing. And what Rick's book is a tool to look at some of the different verses in the Bible as it relates to human purpose glorifying God.
That's good.
Yeah, and if you butcher Rick's book or somebody else's book, that's not so bad. But if you butcher the Bible, that's not so good. So, right. Bobby, I was going to make that. I was going to make that exact point because, not everybody is gifted to teach. We know it's a gift. It's a spiritual gift. Not everybody possesses that. And to get in a group of people and have somebody leading out with the Bible who doesn't really have that gifting to teach, doesn't have the understanding of Scripture that one needs to understand, that can become a train wreck pretty quick. So we need to use a lot of wisdom when it comes to these things and not just paint it like, well, they're using that book, but we use the Bible over here. I think in Purpose-Driven Life, there are literally hundreds of Bible verses that are quoted in that book. So you're going to be getting some Bible stuff for sure. But, and like you said, Bobby, and I have seen this, I've experienced it, maybe you have too. The worst case scenario is sitting in a group of people, somebody reads a verse, and then you just go around and ask for an opinion. What do you think this means? Well, that's really not how you come to the conclusion of what this means. It actually means something, and somebody ought to know what it means so those who don't know what it means can learn.
Mm-hmm. One of the deeper things that I think people are getting at as it relates to Pastor Rick with Purpose-Driven Life, where he'll be criticized, would be because he uses lots of different translations. And so some people will think, oh, is he just trying to force what he wants to say on the Bible? And I don't think that that's Pastor Rick's approach at all. He goes through the Bible trying to see what the Bible has to say about a particular topic. And then, yes, he will look and compare a lot of different translations. And then he's just thinking about the audience as it relates to how to help them to capture what the Bible says. So it's not like he's just piecemealing something together because he doesn't think using one translation is okay. Rick is more of a topical preacher in his style, but I will say this: if anybody wants to listen to Pastor Rick do an expository series, the book of Nehemiah, he did a leadership series, and even the book of James, and he did a phenomenal job walking through those verses, and he wasn't picking and choosing verses. He was just walking right through the passage and pulling out great insights. Not only that, pastors often lead out of the way that they're wired. And I've said before, I look at Pastor Rick like a modern day Solomon. He is an absolute sage. When I was a new Christian, as I've said before, I was so unchurched. I didn't know the difference between the Bible and Romans. So if the pastor said turn to Romans, I thought, well, I brought my Bible. I didn't bring Romans. I didn't realize Romans was in the Bible. So Pastor Rick was, he was easy for me to listen to, and it really brought me to a place of growing. But what he really taught me was life skills through his preaching, life application. And you know what? The truth of the matter is we can sit around, and I love all the information. Hopefully that comes out even on this program. But if we just sit around and treat Sunday morning like a history lesson, then we're missing out on what the Bible says. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Now, Rick will focus more on the doing what it says, and people want him to focus more on interpretation. But Rick will say we have other places in the church for this to take place. They have a partnership with Golden Gate Seminary for people to get degrees in. I don't know if they still do, but for years, his brother-in-law, Pastor Tom Holiday, was doing expository preaching. And his wife, Kay Warren, walking through books of the Bible for people at a midweek service.
Good conversation. McKay, thanks for sending in your question on facebook.com/pastorsperspective. And that segues into another question. Bobby, you mentioned this, so I'm going to bring up Diana's question from California. Why are there so many different versions of the Bible? And why do some churches only use the 1611 King James and refuse to use more modern translations?
Well, let me answer that first. Let's just set the record straight. Nobody uses the 1611 King James version because It is unreadable, and I think there's probably just a handful of copies of it in the world today, and most of them are in museums. So, but go ahead, Bobby.
So what is this person referring to then? Don't they mean
I get, maybe they're just assuming that it's a 1611 version. The updated King James Bible, the last update.
Not the New King James you're talking about.
No, the King James Bible. The last update, I think, was something like 1887. So it has been a while since they've updated it, but it wasn't 1611.
Got it.
Because
Okay.
seriously, you cannot read English from 1611. It is for a modern reader, you're just like, well, what in the world does that word even say? Because they have different letters even than we have in modern English and so forth. So anyway, they're talking, let's just say they're talking about the King James Bible that you can go buy in any shop today.
Mm-hmm.
That was last updated in the late 1800s.
Okay.
And so that's still a little bit out of date, right?
A little.
Yeah. So Bobby, why all these translations? I mean, is people just messing with the Word of God, or what are they doing out there?
Well, I mean, all translations aren't equally valuable, but the point of translations is they serve various purposes. So for those that might be listening, think in these three categories: literal, dynamic equivalent, and paraphrase. Now, a literal translation, and keep in mind, let me qualify, there is no perfectly captured literal translation, because you can't translate word for word out of the Greek and Hebrew a perfect correspondence into English, let's say. But that's the goal, to be as literal as possible. And so if you're trying to put out a Bible version that is going to be literal, then this is going to really appeal to Bible students, pastors, teachers, professors of the Bible, because they want to be as close as they can to the original language. And so the various literal translations would be like your King James, your New King James, or your NASB, or your ESV. When it comes to dynamic equivalent, they look at the Greek and the Hebrew, and again, there's a little bit of Aramaic as well in the Bible. What they're trying to do is not translate the closest word in English that we have to represent the Greek and the Hebrew, but rather the best idea. And so they try to look at the words and say, what's the best idea to capture this word? And this would be more like your NIV, your New Living Translation. And then a paraphrase, that will often have additional words because it's kind of recapping. And this would be Kenneth Taylor's The Living Bible, or Eugene Peterson's The Message. So you have these different translations that serve a different purpose. And as long as we understand that Kenneth Taylor and Eugene Peterson, with paraphrases, they weren't putting this together for the pastor to do in-depth study from, but anybody who might be stuck reading in the King James or the ESV, they might open up the Message and then read that a couple times and then go back into the ESV, and now all of a sudden it makes sense. So those that would have a problem with a paraphrase, then I would say, well, then do you have a problem with Bible commentaries? Because what are Bible commentaries? Well, these are real paraphrases saying this is what the Bible's saying. And so on one hand, you'll get some people go, we only use literal translations, but they don't mind using, study notes and commentaries, but then those are just extra paraphrases. So study Bibles, paraphrases, dynamic equivalent, literal can all help us to better understand what the Bible had to say in the original languages.
Brian?
Yep, I want to add something, but I hear music in the background.
Do. Yes, I do too. It's time for the break. So we're at a cliffhanger here. We're going to find out what Pastor Brian wants to add in just a couple of minutes here on Pastor's Perspective. We're live today for 2 hours. Give us a call. Fill up those phone lines, 888-564-6173. Brian Brodersen and Bobby Conway here, not here tomorrow, so you've got to ask your questions today. Otherwise, wait until next week. 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. We're back on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call us on this Thursday, April 14th, 2022. We will not be live tomorrow, so give us a call today. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait until next week when we're live once again. Also, Pastor Brian will be going out of town soon, so if you have a question specifically for him, call 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173.
Yeah, or you're going to have to wait like 3 weeks.
3 whole weeks.
Talk to me, because
Man.
I'm going to be on the road.
On the road again.
So I wanted to go back to, I just want to give an example of what Bobby was talking about. So he mentioned the King James, the New King James, the NASB, the ESV, all of these being, basically they are considered word-for-word translations, although the translators would admit that they are not word for word, because you can't, as Bobby said, you can't take from Greek directly into English. It wouldn't make any sense. But in these versions, and I'm going to use the King James here, I mean, that is what they have attempted to do, to the best of their ability. And then I want to compare this verse with the NIV, who, as Bobby said, the translators are looking for the idea that's being communicated. They're concerned with words, but they're not hung up on, oh, wait, but that's not the word. What is the idea being communicated? Okay, so Matthew 5, verse 17, Jesus says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." And then he says this, here it is, verse 18, "For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled." So they're doing their best to stick right with the Greek and to translate as literally as possible. Now, here is the NIV. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." Here it is, verse 18. "For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." So on the one hand, you've got not one jot or tittle, which are words we use all the time, obviously. Or
yeah, exactly.
You've got the smallest letter or the least stroke. They say the same thing, except one says it in a way that most people today are going to go, "Oh, I get what that says." Mm-hmm. The other says it in a way that most people today are going to go, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. So that's the idea behind.
What's the verse that has a superfluity? What?
Superfluity of naughtiness.
Yes.
I love that verse. That's James. It's in James, and I think, let me see, I've got a King James version of the Bible right here in front of me, and I will find exactly, is it the 2nd chapter of James? It's talking about, but that is a great
James 1, according to this.
That is a great example.
Yeah.
Double-minded, that which...
121.
121, yes. You're good. Okay, "Wherefore lay aside all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls." We are not laughing at the word of God.
Man.
No,
we're laughing
we're not.
at these words that were translated that at the time made sense to everybody that would read it.
Yep.
Today, what on earth does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Overflow
That's a
of
good point.
wickedness
I
is
remember-
what New King James says.
I remember when I moved to the South and, never heard the gospel till I was 19, and then I end up in Bible college. And it was tough because they were so committed at this, legalistic Bible college I was at to the King James Version and learning it in the King James Version. And, I remember going and hearing this preacher, and I loved his preaching. The only thing I didn't understand is when he would read from the Bible. but I understood his preaching because I wasn't in a place. I mean, I can understand a King James version, just fine now, but at the time it was challenging. And then I had to memorize 50 verses for my evangelism class, all in the King James version. And you can just picture, I'm moved out there from Southern California. I got my own vocabulary, dude and bro and stoked. And this professor who, he got up and he was this elderly gentleman and everybody was, called him, Brother Thomas. And, Brother Thomas wanted us to learn KJV. And he was apart from what we had heard, like the Masonic Lodge, but, we got to, memorize the KJV. And so I went up and I said, I'm out actively engaged in culture. I do a lot of evangelism on the campus, and I'd love to memorize these verses in a version that the people can understand. And he said, no, you've got to memorize them in the KJV. And I just thought, wow, what a disconnect from a professor he had a college kid that was witnessing to several people every week. And I was eager and young, and I just wanted to something fresh. And he was imposing the KJV on me. And I thought, my goodness. And I don't think I remember one of those verses that I memorized in the KJV because my brain didn't think in that kind of fashion at that time. And so there's an example. And I have nothing wrong with reading the King James Version if people want to do that, if they think, oh, it's beautiful. But listen, there's nothing extra special about the KJV. And we use ESV and NASB because the manuscripts are dated even earlier, and we didn't have those manuscripts until after the King James Version with the Dead Sea Scroll discoveries.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, here we go again. Wherefore, lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word. Here is the modern translation. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you.
You know what? I think I like the King James Version better because as long as I don't know what superfluity of naughtiness is, I will continue living in...
Well, Brian, look, it's naughty.
Doesn't work that way.
It's naughty, so it's naughty. And if you're going to intentionally be naughty, you're in trouble.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, when I first became a Christian, of course, that was... Pastor Chuck's Bible was always the King James. Mm-hmm. And but what most people don't realize about Pastor Chuck, number one, he wasn't a King James only guy, so he didn't think that unless you use the King James, you were somehow in trouble. And secondly, Chuck, he knew Scripture so well, and he had been reading it since he could read at 3 years old or whatever it was that he learned to read at, that he could paraphrase it on the fly. So, I mean, you would be reading along with Chuck, and he would be paraphrasing as he would read. So, you're reading your King James Version. He's reading out loud the King James Version. You're going, wait, no, it doesn't say that. Mm-hmm. What is he saying? But, I mean, what he was saying was good because it was making sense to everybody where you might look at the text. But I'll never forget when the New King James came out. I think it was 1982. And I was just beginning to pastor at that time. And I remember there were times when I would be teaching and I would find that I was literally trying to interpret the English of the King James, not so much even trying to interpret what the text itself was saying, from whatever it was, whatever passage, but it was trying to put in common language what the King James was saying. And I'll never forget when the New King James came out and seeing it like, oh my gosh, well, yes, this, of course, makes, this is what it should say. This is how it should read. And I switched to the New King James. I was one of the first New King James guys, that I knew because I just could no longer really hang with the KJV. Now, like you said, Bobby, I mean, if it is for the poetic aspect of it, the literary aspect of it, I mean, all of that is great. But if you're thrown into the deep end as a new believer, and as I was a new believer who wasn't the most well-read person in the world, or a person who spent a whole lot of time in academics, man, it was pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thank God for
I can.
other versions.
Yeah. My experience in Arkansas. I mean, I married an Arkansan. My kids were born in Arkansas. I love the Arkansas people, but there were some backwood areas there, man. And I remember being in this little country town, and I went to this church, and this guy started bragging to me about, last Friday night we had a big bonfire. Yep, we burned all the Bibles that aren't KJV. And I just was like,
whoa,
you've got to be kidding me. And I said, well, you guys just done burned the version that God used to change my life. And you could have heard a pin drop. I remember speaking at another church, and I was the guest pastor. And this was in Clinton, Arkansas. And I was the guest pastor. And I walked in and sat in the pew with my wife. And this little elderly lady came in, and she said, excuse me, you're in my seat. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. And I just moved up, and I thought to myself internally, like, the nerve. And I thought, she doesn't know that I'm the guest preacher, so this ought to be nice. So I got up, and I was the guest preacher, and she comes up to me afterwards, and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. She said, I had no idea you were the guest preacher. And I looked at her and I said, ma'am, with all due respect, I would never come back to this church again if I was a new believer. Fortunately, I could handle it. Wow. And I walked out. I said that because I felt like I was saying it for the event that could happen to somebody else.
Yeah.
But those types of things that I experienced in the South, isn't that just so back school?
It's back something. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like...
So one more question about the King James. Isn't that the version that gets Christians in trouble, so to speak? Because that's the version that uses words like slavery and slaves, or is that in other versions as well?
No.
Okay.
I mean, no. A lot of the versions use slavery.
Okay.
So no, that's not necessarily. But I mean, there are just some, there's archaic words. I mean, like right there, in no wise shall it pass away.
Yeah.
What is that? What do you mean in no wise? Well, wise is the old understanding of wise. One understanding of it was way, in no way pass away. But we only use wise in one sense today. We don't use it in that sense. So, there's just so many of those kinds of words that they don't make sense. But superfluity is kind of a fun word, so it's not a bad word to learn. It's just figuring out where to use it is a little bit complicated.
Indeed.
Yeah.
888-564-6173 is our number today. Give us a call. We're here till 5 p.m. Pacific time. Let's go to Lucy. Oh, Lucy hung up. Okay, Lucy, call us back. Okay. We'll go to Dave in California instead. Hey, Dave, what's up?
There you go.
All set?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Wait. Are you in the drive-thru?
Oh, have it your way. Yes, I figured that would happen. Hey, thank you so much for taking my call. Love your show and all the
and you love French fries too. We can hear.
Yeah, with no salt.
Okay.
No salt. Okay, so at any rate, here's the thing. I was wanting to call you for a few times, and I'm glad I got through. And what my question is when Jesus was on the cross and he descended into the earth. Am I correct so far?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. All right, because here's what I was thinking. It's been on my mind for a few weeks. The question is that still, the culture that he visited and what have you, is it still possible that it survives today within the earth? That's my question. Or was it ruled out that, he did, he visited, and now that no longer exists? That's my question.
Okay, right. Well, first of all, there are differences of opinion on just exactly what is being referred to there. So if you take the passage from Ephesians where it says, he ascended on high, he led captivity captive, he gave gifts to men. who is it that ascended but he that first of all descended to the lower parts of the earth? Okay, so that's the Ephesians passage. Now, some would interpret it the way you just described it, that what is being described here is that Jesus, when he dies, he descends into Hades, and it's there in Hades that he preaches liberty to the captives, and he leads captivity captive, as the passage goes on and says. It's a quote from, I think it's Psalm 69. And so some people would see it like that. Others would say that he descended into the lower regions, which is a reference of his coming from heaven to the earth itself, and not seeing that he went to this abode of the dead, the place that is commonly referred to as Hades. So there's differences of opinion, and even Bible translations will make that distinction. I think the NIV itself does make, it seems to indicate that he's descending to the earth from heaven rather than from earth into the center of the earth.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So then it's really, but do other versions advocate or just fail to refute or interpret?
Well, I think the NIV is doing a little bit of interpreting there, and that's one thing that does happen with some of the dynamic equivalence versions, and sometimes the NIV will add a little bit of interpretation. You know, to some degree, everybody is interpreting to some degree, but some a little more so than others. So I think the more literal reading would be found in, say, the New King James or the ESV, which doesn't say the lower regions of the earth, but just, says, I mean, when the King James, I think, says descended into, does it even say hell? I'm not quite sure. What do you think, Bobby?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's really difficult to imagine that if you had the proper drilling system that we could drill down and discover Hades. So I can understand why some people, is it literally on planet Earth where Jesus descended to? And so is that just being language being used to describe the underworld? Because we often refer to heaven up, but it's not like if we, had a telescope and we could see far enough up, we'd be, oh, there's heaven. So it gets really difficult to understand sometimes these cryptic verses. I think that the real point is what was going on, what was Jesus' purpose during that 3-day, interval. What was he seeking to do? And so what some people begin to speculate is maybe he was providing a post-mortem opportunity for people who died in the Old Testament to have an opportunity for salvation. Others would counter that and say, no, Hebrews 9:27 says, it is appointed for man once to die and then the judgment, so it wouldn't be that. Others would say that, he descended literally into hell to kind of go pay a ransom. And this would be a ransom theory, of the atonement. And he goes down and he, goes down and makes his payment to the evil one as atonement was transpired on the cross. But then we go, this is a later edition of the Apostles' Creed that talks about him descending into hell. And so we kind of walk that away. Others would say that he was going to preach to the Old Testament saints and set captivity free and to usher them out of there. And so there's different explanations about kind of that bizarre passage. And then others will utilize a book like First Enoch that can kind of help us understand a little bit more depth into some of the things that are going on in a situation like that. And this would be an extra canonical book that is not part of the infallible text, but maybe it could give us some gleanings and some wisdom to understanding things that are going on.
Dave, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective at 888-564-6173. So Lucy called in earlier. She had to go for some reason, but her question, I think, is important due to the season that we're in. She says that she was Catholic. She's been a Christian since August. We would have loved to have heard that story. But it says here, let me see if I can bring up the question itself. She wants to know if it's okay for a Christian to practice Holy Week, or Passion Week as it's often known, with all the traditions and everything else that are going on. Brian, what would you say?
Yes, there would be no reason not to do that. Many churches, non-Catholic churches, do that. I know of a few Calvary chapels who are this entire week, they have set it aside. They're having Holy Week services, so they're doing something, I think, each and every night of the week. And as we mentioned at the top of the program, today is Maundy Thursday, so I'm sure they will be observing that in some fashion. So no, there's nothing the matter with it. There are some, sometimes we can be so anti-tradition, we throw out good traditions, and there's nothing the matter with a good tradition. It's just bad traditions we don't want to hold to, and we don't want to get stuck in a traditional rut where we just do something because we've always done it, but we're no longer even thinking about what we're doing because it's just part of a routine. So that's generally the problem, with tradition. So no problem to observe Holy Week.
All right, Lucy, hope you heard the answer to that question. Here's one from Facebook really quick. We'll save these calls for next hour, 888-564-6173, the number to call. Vicky wants to hear our thoughts on Reformed theology. She mentions guys like R.C. Sproul, Steve Lawson, and Vadi Bokum as examples. Bobby, what do you think of these, of Reformed theology?
Reformed theology refers to generally the Calvinistic system of thought that refers to what is now known as TULIP. TULIP is an acrostic that stands for total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance or preservation of the saints. R.C. Sproul preferred preservation of the saints instead of perseverance because it put the emphasis on God doing the preservation versus us doing the persevering. John Calvin, of course, didn't create the tulip, but his followers took the teachings from his institutes and tried to express what it was that he taught through this. And so this is known as Calvinism. And you will have Presbyterian churches like the PCA, but then you will have other people, like you could have Reformed Baptists. You can have lots of people like Matt Chandler, John Piper. They're Reformed in their soteriology. That is in what they believe as it relates to salvation, that the salvific work is 100% God from start to finish, that we are utterly dead in our trespasses and sins. And so the sticking point for people comes down to for those that are on the outside of the Calvinistic camp, to the free will piece. Like, okay, but how can God hold us accountable for not believing in his son if we're so dead that we could never respond to him? Like, we're ultimately accountable for not believing in an information piece that we have no ability to respond to. And that becomes one of the big sticking points. And so I'll slow down for a second because I know that time's running out, and see if Brian wants to jump on this for a little bit. And if not, I'll come back and share some extra thoughts.
Yeah, well, like you said, Bobby, I think the bigger issues there are just the sovereignty of God to the exclusion of human responsibility, which is what you do get.
Well said.
Sometimes, and not everybody would. Not every Calvinist would see it like that or believe it's that way. They do believe that there is some human responsibility, and they sort of have to nuance things and kind of emphasize one aspect of the Calvinistic view and de-emphasize another aspect of it to get closer to what I think is a biblical understanding. The other big feature where you would get a lot of disagreement would be on the third point, the limited atonement. that Christ's death was only for the elect. He did not die for the sins of the world. The world there is a reference just to the elect. And so I understand the reasoning. I've followed the Calvinistic logic on that. And I understand the logic, but I don't see that that's what the biblical text actually says. And so, as we said many times before, many, Calvinism, Arminianism, the different theological systems, we're all believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. Some see the mechanism one way, some see it a different way, but we need to be careful not to be divided up over that. So.
All right, hour number 1 is complete. Hour number 2 begins in about 5 minutes. Give us a call, 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. And Pastor's Perspective is sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.